I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning, and I did not recognize what I saw. Not in a dramatic way, not in the way people describe in movies. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of thing that happens so slowly you almost miss it. The skin under my jaw was softer than it used to be. The lines around my eyes had deepened into something permanent, and my face looked like it was gradually losing the argument against gravity. I was 46 years old. I was not old, but I looked tired in a way that sleep could not fix anymore. My name is Daniel. I live in Austin, Texas. I spent 18 years working in sports medicine, which means I spent 18 years watching what happens to the human body when you either feed it correctly or neglect it. I have seen men in their 60s with the joint integrity of someone 20 years younger. I have seen men in their 40s who moved like they were already falling apart. I understood recovery. I understood tissue repair. I understood that the body is not a static machine, but a living system that responds directly to what you give it. And somehow, despite all of that knowledge, despite everything I had spent my career learning about human physiology, I had never paid serious attention to what was happening to my own skin. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that men were not supposed to care about things like that. I told myself that aging was just aging, and there was nothing honest you could do about it that did not involve a surgeon or a needle or something else that felt like cheating. I bought one expensive moisturizer once, used it for 3 weeks, felt nothing, and threw it away. That was the extent of my skincare history. Then my colleague sent me a file. She was a biochemist named Dr. Patricia Reeves, and she had spent the better part of a decade studying extracellular matrix degradation in connective tissue. She was not the kind of person who forwarded things casually. When something landed in her inbox, she considered it worth sharing. It was because she had already vetted it, already cross-referenced it, already decided it was real. The file she sent me was a scanned copy of a clinical study conducted at the University of Michigan in 1986. 41 pages. Typewriter font. The kind of document that had clearly been produced before anyone cared about making research look appealing. The title was almost deliberately boring. Oral hydrolyzed collagen peptide supplementation and its effects on dermal collagen density in human subjects over a 12-week period. I read it sitting at my kitchen table at 11 at night with a glass of water going warm beside me, and I did not move until I reached the last page. The findings were not subtle. Subjects who consumed a specific daily dose of hydrolyzed collagen peptides showed a measurable increase in dermal collagen density after 8 weeks. Skin elasticity improved. The depth of fine lines reduced by a margin the researchers described as clinically significant. And the mechanism was not mysterious or magical. It was straightforward biology. When you consume hydrolyzed collagen, the protein is broken down into peptides small enough to be absorbed through the gut lining and transported directly into the bloodstream, where they reach the dermis and signal fibroblast cells to increase collagen synthesis. Your skin does not absorb a cream. Your skin responds to what you build it with from the inside. What stopped me was not the science. The science was solid. What stopped me was a single paragraph buried on page 31 in the discussion section, where the lead researcher noted that the study had been submitted to 3 major dermatology journals and rejected by all 3 without peer review. No explanation given. The funding for a follow-up study had been declined by every major cosmetic industry grant available at the time. The research had effectively been shelved, not disproven, not challenged, simply ignored. I sat with that for a long time. I had spent my career in medicine. I understood how research gets funded and how research gets buried. I understood that the cosmetic industry generates over $500 billion annually, selling products that sit on the surface of your skin and do almost nothing to the structural layers underneath. I understood that a powder costing less than $30 for a month's supply, if proven effective, would represent an existential threat to an industry built entirely on expensive topical solutions. And I understood, with a clarity that felt almost uncomfortable, that I had been a consumer of that industry my entire adult life without ever once questioning the logic of it. The next morning, I ordered hydrolyzed collagen peptide powder, unflavored, no additives, the kind that dissolved completely in water or coffee without changing the taste. It cost $22. I started taking it that same evening, 1 tablespoon stirred into my morning coffee, And I told myself I would do it every single day for 12 weeks without expecting anything, without checking the mirror obsessively, without turning it into an experiment. I would just do it and pay attention. By week 4, I noticed my fingernails were growing faster and breaking less. I noticed this before I noticed anything in my face, which I found interesting. By week 7, my wife asked me if I had changed my diet. She did not ask me if I was using something new. She asked if I had changed what I was eating, which told me she was registering something real happening from the inside. By week 10, I stood in front of that same bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning, and the light was just as cold and just as honest as it always had been, and something had shifted. The skin along my jaw was firmer. The lines around my eyes were still there, but they had softened at the edges. My face looked less tired than it had looked in 2 years. I want to be precise here because I spent 18 years in sports medicine, and I have no patience for exaggeration. I did not look 25 again. I did not undergo some transformation that required before and after photographs and a dramatic reveal. What happened was quieter than that, and more significant than that. The structural quality of my skin improved in a way that no cream had ever touched, because no cream had ever addressed what was actually happening underneath the surface. The foundation of the tissue changed, and that is the difference between treating a symptom and addressing the actual biological process. What I did not do was take any of the expensive branded collagen supplements that fill the shelves of every health store in America. I did not take the ones with celebrity endorsements and premium packaging and proprietary blends that contain 17 ingredients you do not need and 1 ingredient you do. I took plain hydrolyzed collagen peptides sourced from grass-fed bovine hide, third-party tested for purity, with nothing added. The same compound studied in that 1986 document, the same mechanism, the same result. I have now been doing this for 4 years. I am 50 years old. I am not trying to pretend that time is not passing, but I am telling you, with the same clinical honesty I would bring to any conversation about tissue repair and physiological response, that the difference between what my skin looks like today and what it looked like at 46 before I started is not subtle. The collagen matrix in my dermis is doing its job in a way it had stopped doing before I gave it the raw material it needed to function. That is not a miracle. That is just biology responding correctly when you stop ignoring it. The industry does not want you to know that the solution is this simple. The solution is not a serum. The solution is not a device. The solution is not a quarterly appointment that costs $400 and lasts 3 months before you need to come back. The solution is a powder that costs less than a lunch, consumed daily, giving your body the one protein it produces less of every single year after the age of 25 and never stops needing. I left sports medicine 2 years ago. I now spend my time doing exactly this, finding the research that got shelved, reading what the industry preferred you never discovered, and telling people what I wish someone had told me at 46 before I wasted years and hundreds of dollars on things that sat on the surface and did absolutely nothing to what was happening underneath. If you want to know the exact protocol I followed, the specific type of peptide, the dosage from the study, the timing, and what to avoid in the products currently on the market, it is all in the pinned comment below. No product links, no affiliate codes, just the information from a 41-page document that the dermatology industry decided was not worth publishing in 1986. I have been sleeping through the night for 14 months straight. Number 3:07 a.m. ceiling staring. No heart slightly racing in a room with no threat. I want to be precise about what that means clinically because I spent a decade in emergency medicine where precision is the only currency that matters. The HPA axis suppression I was experiencing at 32, the dysregulated cortisol rhythm that was canceling the repair window every single night between 2 and 4 in the morning, has normalized. My salivary cortisol curve, which I tested at baseline and again at 90 days, shows a pattern that matches the circadian profile of someone a decade younger. That is not a feeling. That is a measurement. My abdominal composition shifted without a dramatic change in diet. I want you to understand the mechanism behind that because it is not what the fitness industry would have you believe. Chronically elevated cortisol drives preferential fat deposition in visceral adipose tissue through glucocorticoid receptor density. The receptors in abdominal fat are more sensitive to cortisol than receptors anywhere else in the body. When you normalize the cortisol curve, you remove the primary hormonal signal driving that specific deposition pattern. The belly that did not move, regardless of what you ate, was never a caloric problem. It was an endocrine problem. And the endocrine problem had a name the entire time. My grandfather developed Alzheimer's at 68. My father had his first cardiac event at 61. I entered medicine partly to understand why the men in my family fell apart before their time, and I spent years treating the acute manifestations of that collapse in emergency departments across this country without ever learning the slow medicine that preceded them. What I know now, mechanistically, not philosophically, is that chronic cortisol elevation accelerates hippocampal neuronal loss through glucocorticoid-mediated excitotoxicity. That the mitochondrial depletion cascade I described earlier is the shared upstream pathway for Alzheimer's, for ischemic heart disease, for type 2 diabetes. That the PNAS meta-analysis showing 9 to 17 years of additional biological aging from chronic cortisol disruption was not describing an abstraction. It was describing my grandfather. It was describing my father. It was describing what I was beginning to become at 32, quietly, without drama, in a body that was running a biological program nobody had told me I could interrupt. The question I cannot answer is this: what changes if the cortisol rhythm gets addressed 20 years earlier? Not rhetorically, mechanistically. If the HPA axis dysregulation that begins silently in the late 30s is corrected before it has a decade to suppress MSC activation, shorten telomeres, deplete NAD+ reserves, and feed the mitochondrial decline that precedes every major age-related disease, what changes downstream? The honest answer, based on the literature, is probably a great deal. The dishonest answer, the one the American healthcare system is structurally incentivized to give you, is that we treat disease when it arrives, not the biology that builds it. That answer has a cost. My family paid part of it. The body was not breaking down. The repair system was being blocked. The block has a name: cortisol rhythm dysregulation, mitochondrial depletion, suppressed stem cell activation windows. The name has a protocol: KSM 66 ashwagandha at 600 milligrams daily, polyphenol activation through specific dietary compounds, sleep architecture protection, NAD+ pathway support. The protocol has evidence: 20-plus randomized controlled trials, a 2024 meta-analysis of 32 studies in 12,000 individuals, a Nobel Prize in 2016 for the autophagy mechanism this entire cascade depends on. The complete dosing framework, the specific product criteria, the sequencing, it is all in the pinned comment. That is the whole video. That is the whole answer. It was always this simple. It was never supposed to reach you.